Good evening to you all. Welcome to our gathering this September. So let's take a moment to just settle in and land. As usual, sit comfortably, feel your feet on the ground. Rest your hands palms down on your knees and thighs so it feels as ordinary as possible. So that your mind doesn't wander off into thinking this is somehow special because it's labeled meditation. Instead, it's just you and life and listening. And as you sit there listening, actually activate your sense of hearing. Actively tune in not to what it is you're hearing, but to the act of opening your ears wide. Without any effort to hear anything in particular. Just make your ears wide and receptive to whatever sound may be coming your way. Just an easy widening and easy expansion of your willingness to receive sound. Just that disposition to receive sound. And as if by sinking ever more deeply into your ability to hear and your willingness to receive sound, to let it come in from distant regions, as it were. You could feel yourself opening up and opening out to the world. Allow the sense of the space you find yourself relating to expand. So there's a kind of curious movement in two directions at the same time. You, in your willingness to let sound enter the space of your awareness, are going deeper within. deeper within, deeper into the space that is receptive to sound. And with that coupling, you're going within. As you open your receptiveness to sound, you almost acquire a mastery, a quiet, effortless mastery of sensing space around you and above you and even behind. It is almost as if space and its expansion were palpable to you. As though you could reach out with your hearing and touch space out there as you would a fabric that your hands are very interested in. All of a sudden, if you are standing in the middle of a market where all kinds, all manner of fine fabrics are being sold, free from any greed to what this one or that one or that one, you just feel that curiosity of, as your eyes rest on that particular fabric, your hands could reach out and take in the texture of that particular fabric. That kind of interest, touching something, and I'm keenly interested in just how it feels. In like manner, your hearing can be interested in the fabric of any sound that you're hearing. What's that sound made up of? And suddenly the question isn't, do I like it or don't I? Is it too loud or is it too faint? There's a different, relaxed curiosity that wakes up that just says, what's the texture of it? What's the fabric of that sound? And you get interested in layers and layers and layers of sound. Notice how opening up to the layers and layers of sound even when there is nothing to hear, you are of course hearing my voice, in between when I'm not speaking, and if the speaker on your device is not making any extra noise, even when there is nothing to hear, notice how that interest, keen interest in the texture and the layers and the fabric of sound is enhancing, deepening, and refining your sense of space. Space you feel that you can hear. Or space that you can feel as your hearing opens up to it. Check in with your shoulders. Of course, if this exercise has had you try, perform any kind of effort, shoulders may have responded and tightened. But if you have just surrendered your receptivity to sound out and opened it to space, chances are the opposite will have happened and the shoulders will have dropped. As you are, in a sense, defenseless, but simply because no defense is needed against what sound may come. You are carefree, as it were, feeling sovereign for the moment, at the center of your willingness to receive sound. While keeping your awareness on the opening to space that you have generated and felt with opening up to sound, let your sensory awareness travel to the area of your forehead. Let your sensory awareness from within, while the ears remain wide open, travel in the direction of your forehead and energy locks 20 on the left and right sides. And see whether your forehead on both sides and with it, your thinking can be similarly interested both in space and in the fabric, the texture of thought when thinking happens. Nothing complicated or conceptual. It's just if you were to pick up on anything you're thinking at any given time, or aware of any mental imagery, then can something in your awareness meet it with the same curiosity that you'd have in the market stall as your hand is appreciating fabric, not out of greed, but out of profound willingness and interest in taking in just what this is made of. Look at the texture of that thought. Feel into the fabric of that emotion. Or whatever it is that you feel coming up into your space. And curiously observe with this kind of attention, soft, wide, present, and without effort, is having on the state of your body and on your inner state. So the announcement for this evening said we'd be starting with a feeling exercise into the topic of the month, and the topic of the month is small intestine function energy. How was this? A feeling exercise into the small intestine? We didn't go near there, but small intestine function energy is the organ building, body building, life building energy, the energy that writes consciousness into a body, that is all centrally concerned with just that kind of interest in the world. The texture, the fabric of what this object of perception and that and that and that is made up of. Small intestine function energy has a lot to do with hearing, which is why I started with that sense. It flows through the inner ear. It also has a lot to do with balance, because the organ for physical balance is at the center of the inner ear, is in the inner ear. But when you get the kind of detached and at the same time keenly interested sense of orienting in the world, if you get interested not in listing what it is you can hear, the boom, boom, owning it, possessing it, fixating it on it, but feeling, like that delicate sense of really taking in a scent, a smell, a taste, and finding the details of it, or really taking in how something feels to the touch, or really taking in how something sounds, layer after layer after layer, feels layer under layer under layer, how thought feels in its structure, in its makeup, layer within layer within layer. Then you enter the world of the kind of consciousness that small intestine function energy actually does develop and write not only into a body, but into your way of being and acting. this kind of differentiated interaction with the world that wants to know the fine grain of what life is made up of what your experience is made up of, that won't settle for the coarse grain, that wants the retina display, so to speak, and not the old-fashioned black and white screen. That part that says there's so much more to see, hear, feel, understand. The small intestine, on its surface, which is supposed to be about as big as a football field or some such sportsy reference, it's big. It's got a lot of surface. That's where the food stuff that you have eaten and started digesting is then digested further. And what is useful to your body will be carefully picked out of what's not useful. There are these different receptors in your intestines that know what to absorb. There's a precise looking, a very detailed looking at, what have we got here? And that looking, interestingly, is done not just by those receptors of your small intestine. They are the ones that determine what's taken in and what isn't. But for the food stuff to be broken down finely enough and pre-analyzed and analyzed and analyzed and dissolved into pieces, which is actually what the Greek word analyze means. It means analysis, means to the dissolving into pieces or the dissolving apart. So the dissolving into small enough pieces of your food for your intestine to be able to make an informed decision happens through what is called the microbiome these days. The microbiome, that is the multitude of different microbes, mostly bacteria, that live in your intestines and without which you couldn't live, or more completely, without which you simply wouldn't be you. And that is such an interesting fact of biology that we can't close our eyes to any longer. You know, we are so used to thinking, I am me, and these are the cells of my body, so all of that is me. And yes, I know there are some microorganisms that live in my body, and for the most part, we think of those as germs that make us sick, and that our immune system, which we have learned to describe with a vocabulary of war, fights and beats and defeats. Well, the bacteria that you have in your intestines are not only helpful, they're not only necessary and indispensable. That's not the point. They're actually indivisible from who you are. Your microbiome is more individual, we are told, than a fingerprint. And a fingerprint is individual enough that there won't be a second one of yours on the entire planet, not in your family, not anywhere else. But your microbiome has more differentiating features, we are told, than even a fingerprint does. So it is amazing how our microbiome, the gut microbiome, is made, it actually starts in the mouth, is made up largely by what we first get from our mothers, especially when they breastfeed us, but of course what's already there in utero, and the big part comes afterwards with the mother's milk and so on and so forth. More comes out from the outside world, and research has shown that when you try to alter a person's microbiome, because a lot of their good and ill health can depend on that, it tends to revert back to what it used to be. So we're still in a phase of discovering what part of our psychological and biochemical makeup may be the determining factor in the fact that our microbiome does tend to revert back to where it was in good or ill health. So if you take small intestine function energy into the picture here for a moment, which is the topic of the month in the online study circle, the level of energetic presence and consciousness that you have just explored, you could go back to exploring any number of times as you watch this video again later, that keen interest in understanding layer after layer upon layer upon layer of the fabric of the moment, the fabric of the physical stuff that you are made up of, the fabric of the physical and other stuff that comes to nurture you, your body, mind, and spirit, your experience. Opening up to the fact that large intestine function energy symbolized by Virgo, the Virgo aspect of human consciousness. Again, for those who might be watching this the first time, this isn't to say that small intestine, obviously, is an organ function that mostly concerns people born under that sign. That personality trait is one that each human being not only has, but needs to have and express, surely in their individualized way, but express in some way. The deeper that level of ever keener interest in the world goes, ever keener interest in what else is there, what am I made up of, the more deeply I will be processing the world and integrating it. So that to me is the absolutely fascinating journey of small intestine function energy, and such a big explanation too of why small intestine is so key to our immune system. Way too often referred to as our immune defense. There again, we have chosen unwisely, I think, to describe the immune system in bellicose terms, in terms of war, fighting something off, rather than simply knowing what to keep and what not to keep, what to keep whole and what to dissolve. You can think of it as a hostile action going on in your body the whole time, and then inside and outside this constant struggle. Or there can be a peaceful place inside that knows that some things are useful, so we keep them and feed them and enhance them, and some things are not useful, so we dissolve them and evacuate them. Yes, there is a breaking down, there is a neutralizing of microorganisms, but you don't have to get worked up into hostility. You can stay in the matter-of-factliness that the things that do not fit will be disposed of. So that's food for thought for you around the topic of small intestine function energy. And with that, the first half hour of a monthly gathering has passed, and I will move over to our questions now. Especially since Taj, whose feedback I will be reading first, is reminding me that I left a few questions unanswered last month and promised to answer them this month. So, first I'll start with her feedback from this past month's experience. More and more, Taj writes, I appreciate the practical applications of this course, Building a Life. Building a Life is the title of the book that accompanies Module 3 of my foundational training. It's the title of the workbook that contains my work on organ function energy. And Taj is using the same title for the current course we are involved in, course of study on organ function energy in the online study circle. In August, she writes, I traveled to a course, and I've done many times over the years. Usually that learning process ended at the end of the course, with memories and notes stored somewhere. However, this time, armed with knowledge of a possible cycle of learning, I settled in for a longer haul. Meanwhile, while I was in the course, I remained aware that this was only the gathering phase. When I came home, I continued the course process, intentionally owning the data and experience I had gained. Watching my process, I became aware of a shifting from the owning part to the work of digesting. Gathering, owning, digesting, as Taj is referring to, are aspects that we discovered when we discovered lung function energy, large intestine function energy, stomach function energy. The work of digesting. Yes, work. As of this writing, it's taking a willing patience to follow the sensuous fulfillment quality of spleen function energy to happen in its own timing. It has begun, although not yet as fully as I imagine it can. I've nicknamed this cycle Me into the World, World into Me, a place for everything, everything in its place. Such a joy. Pardon the American slang, but heart function energy is a real kick-ass flow. Oh, I don't mind the American slang. In fact, I can go into American accent at this point. Some of you will have heard me explain that in some of the videos I've recorded. Of course, I lived in the States for a total of 5 years of my life. I originally learned English with a British accent, the way I'd been speaking it until this moment right now. As soon as I'm in North America, the States or Canada, I shift to this accent, as I did when I lived there. It's just that in recording the online courses and also in doing these Q&As, I tend to switch back to more of the British accent, which is how I first learned to speak the language. It doesn't feel like play acting to me in either case, because both of them are a very real part of my life. And, well, as I've just identified, one came first. I was very, very fortunate to have this teacher in secondary school when I first started English at the age of 9, who loved pronunciation. And he just worked with us so that after 6 weeks of starting English, nobody in my class was speaking like this anymore. You know, I know that then you can clearly identify us as Germans, and many Germans were not so fortunate, and so they speak like this. But I was very fortunate to have a teacher who, in a very small intestine sort of way, got us all, most of us, my classmates were 10 years old, interested in the sounds. You know, the O. He'd have us practice the O and the TH. And it was just so musical. And life can be that sensuous. And if you can get people interested in that, then the world opens up layers and layers and layers. Anyway, so Taj is saying, if you don't mind the American slang, heart function energy is a real kick-ass flow. And that just vibrates differently to say it's a real kick-ass flow than to phrase it some other way. Not better, not worse, just different. What I took from one of the heart function energy teaching videos, in my words, was rather than succumb to fixing people, just be in my radiance and observe how others self-organize around that. Yep, it works. Good discipline, good entertainment. Thank you. I'm also delighting in the timing of a simple process from the freebie resources for this time. So if those of you who don't know what's being referred to here, go to the site you see referenced here for the English offerings, online offerings. That's where you will find a free program called Resources for These Times. It is free, it will remain free, and there's a chapter there, actually not called a simple process, but it's called the inner space, and then a simple something, something other than process. But anyway, it's a very, very simple drawing exercise. It's a 2.5-minute video that has you draw and then write something to define a space that's your inner space. You don't have to tell anyone about this, share this with anyone. It's not fancy, it's not a visualizing exercise. It's a very, very simple tool. I'll let you discover it in Resources for These Times, the 15-chapter free online offering I created when the first lockdown happened in March of 2020. So, 13s, 14s, 15s, you often suggest that we use the feeling exercise and the circulation pattern as a way to learn the organ of the month, which I do and enjoy greatly. And I am totally in love with the quickies, all of them. Just yesterday, I experimented with going from lung to small intestine. So that's lung, large intestine, stomach, spleen, heart, small intestine. That's 6 flows, just so you know in case you don't, dear viewer. Using only the points in the third quickie, the one for organ function energy, attuning, of course, to the quality of each associated flow personality. It was very settling and nurturing, but then I got to the last 3. Spleen, safety energy lock 14, then heart, safety energy lock 15, followed by small intestine, safety energy lock 13. Suddenly I was in tears with the profundity of that experience. No wonder you like them so much. Yeah, I do. 13, 14, 15. So, in the August call, last month's Q&A here on YouTube Live, you mentioned that you had a course around safety energy locks 13, 14, and 15 in German. I nearly started drooling on my keyboard. That's not good for your keyboard. You shouldn't do that, Taj. Oh, wait, that's probably not what you were wanting to hear. As of this writing, that call has had 142 hits on the YouTube channel and probably countless more in the online study circle participants who might actually be drooling. So I'm wondering if you might consider making an English version of the world of 13, 14, 15. With much gratitude, Taj. Thank you. I'll take that on board. You know, the way that actually happened is there's a wonderful woman in Oldenburg in Germany who does an Advent calendar every year. That's a very German tradition where from December 1st to the 24th, and she carries it through to the 26th for obvious reasons you might imagine, you open a window. And in these recent days of the internet, many companies have started giving you a new window to open. You know, when we were kids here in Germany, we'd open a window each day to either a little illustration. Sometimes it would be transparent paper, and when all windows were open, you can put a candle behind the Advent calendar, and you'd have all these backlit little transparent images like church windows almost. But of course, there are always also the Advent calendars that have chocolates in them. Guess which kids often prefer. And sometimes there are little gifts as well. So the hands-on Advent calendar that this German practitioner and self-help teacher made had a different window each day, and she asked different teachers and instructors and practitioners to share something for one of these windows or more. And one year she asked me, and she said, pick the dates and the topic. And I said, listen, I'll take December 13th, 14th, and 15th and make a short video for those. And that's where that came from. And after it had run 2 years in a row in her Advent calendar, I decided to upload it. It actually continues with number 16 as well. So all that to say, it's a German tradition. You don't have that, so you don't get those. No, I'll think about it. I had fun producing those. Maybe we'll subtitle them and upload them, or maybe I'll go back and make something. Thanks for suggesting. Now to your questions, Taj. First, a gentle reminder that you offered to give a more thorough answer to 2 questions from the August call. Are the 12 organ function energies assigned to bust line, waistline, and hip line? If so, who goes where? You wanted to speak about the energetic relationships. So, there are 2 ways in which organ function energy relates to bust line, waistline, and hip line. First of all, organ function energy goes from the chest, from building the chest and the vital center, out through building the draft, the design, the blueprint for the arms, and then hands. Lung designs these 2 fingers. So from the chest out to the fingers, then back from one of our fingers to both the belly, the abdomen, the gut, and the head, then traveling on from the head to the toes, and then from the toes up to the vital center. So and then it does the same again. Chest to fingers, fingers to face, face to toes, toes to chest. And then it does it a third time. And the first of the flows is called a chest flow because it begins in the chest. And the next in line is called a finger flow because it begins in a finger. And the third is called a face flow because it begins in the face. And the final one is called a toe flow because it begins, well, in a toe. So all the chest flows, because they go from the chest out, are on one level connected to or seen as in relationship with bust line. In the back, mostly though, with number 10. The finger flows are all seen closely related to bust line as well, but on the 13 level. On the 13 level. Fertility and transformation. The face flows are, on one level, all seen as closely related to the bust line, the middle, because, I'm sorry, I misspoke, not bust line then, of course, waistline, the middle, because they all help process and digest. So in that sense, all face flows have, among many other connections, they also have a strong one to the middle. And the toe flows, which all flow up from the toes to bring revitalizing and transformative energy up, and they each cross at the base, the perineum area for spleen, at the reproductive organs for kidney, and in the symphysis pubis, the piece of cartilage in the middle of the so-called pubic bone, which isn't actually one solid bone, for liver. So they, in that sense, have, again, among the many other relationships they have, a strong one to 15. So that's one set of relationships. The other is perhaps more interesting and perhaps harder to understand at first, depending on the kind of background you have in Jin Shin Jitsu. You remember, don't you, from what I said a few minutes ago, that energy flows chest to fingers to face to toes to chest to fingers to face to toes to chest to fingers to face to toes and back up to the chest. It does this 3 times in a row. Lung, large intestine, stomach and spleen, the first round, through chest, finger, face and toes, is called surface function energy. And when it is in harmony, these 4 functions converge at central 13 and have a relationship with bust line. The next round of 4, heart, small intestine, bladder and kidney, are called the deep function energy, and they converge at what Mary calls the navel area, which is actually, if we want to be precise in this particular context, central 15, between the umbilicus and the pubic bone. So it's quite a region here. Yeah? This hand now generously placed between my umbilicus, my belly button, and my pubic bone. That would be where, when all is well, when all is in harmony, deep function energy meets. And because you're all very psychic who are watching this, you have now begun to guess where the third round meets. So, diaphragm, umbilicus, gallbladder and liver, the chest, finger, face and toe flows of the third and final round are called middle flows. And where do they meet? Well, of course, in the middle. Waistline at central 14. Surface flows, deep flows, middle flows. Why would they be called that? Surface flows, second depth, lung and large intestine, related to the fat tissue layer, I was going to say fabric, tissue layer of deep skin or connective tissue, and stomach and spleen, first depth, connected to skin surface. So on one hand, you may say, surface floors, I understand, they're the skin layers. Whereas the next two, heart, small intestine, fifth depth, related to the tissue layer of bone, bladder and kidney, fourth depth, related to the tissue layer of muscle. Bone and muscle, yep, that's the deepest level. Whereas blood and energy, middle level, they go through everything. Blood and energy, they permeate all the levels and they tie all the levels together. So in that sense, surface, deep, and middle makes sense. And also 13, what am I feeling drawn towards, what am I expanding into, etc. Whereas 15 level is more, if you feel into this part of your body, you'll definitely get in touch with what's drawing you and where to. If you place your hand underneath your belly button and feel into that area with, and then later without the hand, you'll feel that that has you very much anchor into yourself. And if you feel into the solar plexus area, first with, then without a hand, you'll feel that that's interested in above and below. It's interested in the connecting of the levels. So there's a lot there for you to explore. Go into the physical exploration that I described last, and you'll find out much more about that. I hope that was a satisfying answer. Satisfying only in the sense that it made you curious enough to keep exploring. All right? Oh dear. Yes. And while we're on the bust line, waistline, hip line topic, my notes have safety energy locks 3 and 19 as treatment for all three. Bust line, waistline, and hip line. Could you talk about why they assist all three? No, is the short answer. I could speculate. I don't remember hearing that. But of course, you could say number 3 is permeability, and 3 itself gets to everything. You could say it's a mediator quickie, and mediator works with everything. I could make a case for it, but it's not something I recall hearing, which doesn't mean that I didn't hear it. Maybe I did and I just blanked on it. But anyway, just play with it and see what feels good. Then, 2. I'm assuming that safety energy locks and elements are connected according to the depths, yes? To which you answered no, and would speak more on this as well. Right. No. When Mary went through all the safety energy locks, she simply gave a color, an element, sometimes a planet, sometimes a zodiac sign, that she had from somewhere. She never, ever, ever expounded on it. She never explained. So no, the safety energy locks come into being in the depths in a very simple order. From main central, left and right supervisors are born at the 1. And then from the 1 they flow down the front of the body, they flow up, giving the blueprint or draft for the backside of the body, where numbers 2, 3, and 4 come into being. So they are all on 4th depth. If that were to determine the element, then they'd all have to be earth. They're not. And the color would all have to be yellow. It's not. And then over the top of the head, that first round continues. And as the energy passes the groin area, it dives more deeply into the body. As it reaches the insides of the knees, it has reached a deeper level in the body and starts a second go around, which creates numbers 5, 6, 7 on the way back up, numbers 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then on the way back down, 13, 14, and 15. Goes into the next round. So second depth has these 11 safety energy locks. Third locks, which are not all air elements. They vary in elements. And I personally have not studied that much, simply because I have studied over the years the things that I can make experiential sense of. I know that Mary did at some point take an interest in Manly Hall and the teachings of Paul Foster Case. She read some of their works. She met, I believe, listened to Manly Hall in a meeting or two. And she was always interested in picking up related things. And I know that both Paul Foster Case and Manly Hall, I think, dealt with the numbers and the tarot, and I believe those appropriations of elements to numbers come from them. So it's an external system. She just quoted it because she figured, oh, these things are related, and always added, so those of you interested in numbers can study that further. That's all. Now, on to your next question from this month, so I don't have to do the same thing again and say I'll tell you about it in October. Scattering. In the stomach and spleen tutorials, you referenced Mary saying that in the stomach function energy circulation pattern, the energy scatters at the 23s, and in spleen function energy, the energy scatters at the root of the tongue. What is the significance of this scattering in each of these flows? I'm surprised I didn't also say that in the teaching videos, because I thought I had, but to me, scattering translates as it either densifies further and builds something else, or it energizes what's right there. So in the case of stomach function energy, when stomach function energy scatters at 23, which is under the 12th rib in the back, to me it actually contributes to feeding the energetic reserve that we have at number 23. The root of the tongue, when spleen flow scatters there, it sees to it that our tongue have the energy, actually the whole cavity of the mouth have the energy to stay soft and appreciative of life as a mouth-watering experience, literally and figuratively speaking. So it takes energy, to feel life and to take it in. To me, the scattering signifies that. Quickie madness. As mentioned, I'm totally in love with all of the quickies. I've been puzzling for a while about the multiple uses of the same quickie for different purposes. For example, high 1 in both lung and stomach quickies. Safety energy lock 19 in both spleen and small intestine quickies. 3 finger in third finger, I guess, in both lung and large intestine quickies. 5th finger for both spleen and heart quickies. So, using a particular body place does different things depending on what? I'm curious to the role of intention and participation in how effectively or efficiently a specific quickie works, as opposed to it works just because it does, no matter what. Well, yeah. I'm sure somebody paid you to ask me a question about intention, because those who know me around that word know, oh, here he goes. She said intention, so here he goes. I really don't think that we need to have an intention for energy to work. I think that intention is greatly overvalued, and that the dangers of intention are underappreciated. The fact that all of the horrors that humanity has ever committed are, without any exception, the fruit of carefully and thoroughly held intention should give us pause and make us understand that in an art of harmonizing, in an art of allowing universal aliveness to start a delicate conversation with individualized life intelligence, jumper cable energy, seventh depth energy, having a subtle conversation with the life wisdom embodied in the person I'm working with, my intention, my ego's intention should just simply stay out of the picture. And the same goes for working with myself. Now, orientation, being gently oriented towards the fact that I'm on this level or that level or that level may or may not help. I don't know. I don't play with these things. I just don't. And maybe that's just, superficial of me or something. I just have not gone there. But yes, the safety energy locks. I mean, have you noticed how many of the same safety energy locks we use in all the organ functions? 14 in this and 14 in that. 10 out of 12 organ function energies use at least one of the 14s. 3 of those 10 use both 14s for one side of the flow. So how does the body know what it's doing with the 14? I believe it knows it from the context of what it is I'm holding, one thing after another. But that's just my guess. 2, in the 12 applications of Jinshinjutsu, body repair being only 1/12, and regarding the 4 quickies, under what conditions would one choose one quickie over another? I'm not sure you want to hear my answer. The one that feels best, the one that I grab first without thinking, and that's the one that I choose. But, there may be a more differentiated way of choosing. I'm not saying mine's the be-all, end-all, but that's just how I go about it. Also, is there a correlation between the 4, body, mind, consciousness, voice, and the fact that Mary emphasized 4 quickies? No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think that each of the 4 quickies will, in harmonizing the flow, address aspects of each of the 4 levels. And for those of you who didn't catch what Taj is referring to here, Mary says in her textbook 2 on page 3 that organ function energy builds the physical body as well as the invisible consciousness, voice, and energy. So there's 1 visible and 3 invisible aspects, a total of 4 aspects that each organ function energy builds, protects, repairs, as Mary says. So 3 times 4, building, protecting, and repairing 4 different aspects. 3 times 4, 12. That's what was being referenced. It is 9 o'clock, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to get to Karen's question. Hi, Karen. Thank you for submitting this one. And thank you, Taj, both for the feedback and the keen interest in the differentiated questions. I absolutely love it. Love having this conversation. And for any of you who have been hesitating to send me questions, let me remind you that if your concern has been that you don't want your name quoted, you can just tell me to read your question anonymously, or tell me what name you want to be called by. You want to have your question read under. If you're really called Thomas and you want me to call you Joe, or say Joe asks, these are. I also think, though, that so many people will be really happy and grateful to you if you ask a question that you think is dumb, and they also think is too dumb to ask, and will be really, really happy to hear answered. So here's to so-called dumb questions which don't exist. So don't hesitate to ask. Anyway, Karen, I don't believe, has that hesitation, and certainly hasn't been asking any dumb or superficial questions. I'm looking forward to joining your webinar on YouTube again, Karen says, and this time I have a bigger label-related question. I have an elderly client booked to come for Jinshinjutsu support with a prostate cancer support. We have not yet started our sessions, so I can't say more regarding pulses or other starting points for treatment just yet. All I know is that there are related vision and hip issues, including relatively recent surgery too. I know these are only snippets to go with, but I'd warmly welcome any bigger picture input you may have regarding this specific label and how you might approach it as a Jinshin-Jyutsu practitioner. With gratitude and appreciation, Karen. Karen, I'm glad you're asking this question because it provides me an opportunity to say the label itself very, very rarely gives me a very advanced sense yet of what I might be doing. Of course, we know what reproductive organs may be related to, but I'm glad you're describing at least a little bit of the context of what's happening to him, because there are related hip and what else was there? Eye problems, was it? Vision and hip. And you mentioned that he's elderly. And any tumor is a hardened energy condition. So a flow that immediately does come to mind is 5, 6, 7, 8. The 5, 6, 7, 8 flow works with all hardened energy conditions. So everyone watching this will remember I talked about toe flows. It will work with the 3 toe flows, the spleen flow, the kidney function energy, and the liver function energy. It's a flow that works with new and renewing, refreshing, flowing, water-like energy that ascends from toes through the base of your body, the lower abdomen, to all the vital organs. So that is definitely one that I would recommend checking while you look for the different things that on different levels, personality, body, emotional setup, thinking, and habits, may have hardened over the decades of his life. And if you can get into that gentle softening the fabric of his body, mind, and spirit, softening the fabric of his thinking, of his feeling, of his body, that would greatly help. And of course, we would never be thinking about getting that thing, that tumor, to go away. We would always think about softening the fabric of this person's way of living their life in such a way that the body can do the best it is able to do at this point and under these circumstances to either soften the fabric, the actual tumor tissue, and or be soft enough to deal with whatever medical treatment is being proposed. Let's never forget that this is one of the great things that Jinshin-Jyutsu can and will do, help to soften our energetic and physical and mental and emotional structure enough that we can deal well with what hardship or hard treatment the body and the being may be faced with at any given time. And one final note, Karen, a 13 flow. I would definitely start with a 5, 6, 7, and 8 flow, and then I would give it a 13 flow, give him a 13 flow, because of the renewing energy, because of its relationship, again, to the reproductive organs. And since you'll be seeing him, I suppose, soon, maybe you'll have further, more specific questions or some feedback on what I recommended today when we gather again next month, which, if I'm not mistaken, will again be in the 3rd week of the month, not the 2nd one. So next month, of course, we'll be looking at bladder function energy. And for those of you who have not yet checked out the free offerings that I have online and or the online study circle, those who might be interested in acquiring the full 15-month program on organ function energy or join the ongoing study circle, here is the link to do so. Have a lovely evening, and I will see you next month.